Why did they all look at her that way? The room was dim, heavy with the kind of silence that pressed against the skin. Maps lay scattered across the briefing table, their corners curling from overuse. Radios crackled in the background with broken voices, codes, fragments of fear. And there she was standing at the edge of the circle, her fingers tightening around the chair back, waiting. No one spoke her name. Her breath felt sharp in her lungs, but she forced it steady. She had been here before, the outsider in uniform. The woman in a room where voices were trained to cut steel, yet eyes always softened with doubt when they fell on her. Tonight, though, she wasn't sure if the silence meant disbelief or fear of what they were about to ask her to do. The commander finally broke it, his voice low. "You know the terrain, you know the target." A pause. "It's yours if you take it." Her throat tightened. She had asked for responsibility, begged for it even, but not like this. Not on a mission where the lines blurred between duty and survival. The map in front of her showed ridges that looked like scars, valleys like open wounds. And somewhere out there, behind the stone and dirt, was a signal they couldn't trace but couldn't ignore. She met his eyes. "What's the margin?" He hesitated. "None." The others shifted, their boots scuffing against concrete, their expressions unreadable. She could feel the weight of their unspoken doubts. Would she falter? Would she pull the trigger if it came to that? Her stance did not waver. She nodded once. "Then I'll go." But there was something she hadn't told them. Not yet. The air outside the hangar bit at her skin as she stepped into the night. She adjusted the strap of her pack, the faint squeak of leather loud in the quiet. The sky was too clear for comfort, the kind of clear where sound carried, where shadows betrayed. Somewhere above, a thin slice of moon watched her. She let her eyes linger there, drawing steadiness from the cold light. Voices behind her murmured, but she ignored them. She had always walked alone in the moments before a mission. It wasn't arrogance, it was survival. You couldn't share the quiet before a storm. You had to breathe it in, let it cut into you, let it remind you what was real. Her hand brushed against the inside pocket of her jacket. A photograph rested there, creased and worn, the edges nearly frayed away. She didn't take it out, not yet, but just knowing it was close steadied her heartbeat. The transport hummed low in the distance, its rotors slicing through the night like an old memory. She climbed in, keeping her movements sharp, practiced. Every soldier moved around her in patterns of muscle memory. Yet even here, even surrounded by routine, she felt their glances. Not mocking, not anymore. Something heavier, something that said, "If you fail, we fail with you." And beneath their unspoken weight, another thought pressed harder. If you fail, you'll never forgive yourself. The bird lifted into the air. Wind tore through the open side panels, bringing the smell of dust and oil sharp against her senses. She closed her eyes for a moment, listening. Every sound mattered. Every silence mattered more. Then a hand on her shoulder. She opened her eyes. It was Malik, the comms operator. He was younger than most, his beard barely thick, his eyes always carrying that flicker of nerves. He leaned closer so his words wouldn't be lost to the rotor wash. "Don't let them get to you," he said. His voice cracked on the last word like it had carried too much weight. She gave him the faintest nod. No words. Words sometimes cheapened the promise. The mountains grew larger beneath them, ridgelines carved like the backs of old beasts. Somewhere out there the mission waited, and somewhere deeper inside her a memory stirred. She had been on these ridges once before, not in uniform, not with a rifle. Back then it was a different war, a personal one. She shook the thought away, but it lingered like smoke you couldn't wash off. The pilot's voice cut through the comms. 2 minutes. She checked her rifle. The metal was cold, smooth under her hands. A tool, nothing more. Yet she couldn't help but think of the way her father once cleaned his old hunting rifle back home. The way he treated it not as a weapon but as a ritual, as if every pull of the cloth against steel was an act of patience. He had taught her that silence was not absence. Silence was presence. She breathed that lesson in now. The landing was rough, the skids grinding against rock. Boots hit dirt, muffled commands scattered. She jumped last, crouching low, her eyes scanning the horizon. Too quiet, always too quiet before it broke. They moved in staggered formation, shadows blending with shadows. The cold air bit through her gloves, numbing her fingertips. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, sharp and lonely. Then silence again. Every step pressed deeper into the ground, as if the earth itself wanted to remember them. Malik's voice whispered over comms. Signals close, maybe 2 clicks north. She raised a fist, halting the line. Her eyes adjusted, searching the rocks, the brush, the places where silence wasn't natural. The mission was clear: intercept the signal, identify the source. But missions were never just words. They were choices carved into bone. Her breath grew ragged as they climbed, but her stance never faltered. The ridge narrowed, forcing them single file. Her mind flickered with thoughts she couldn't silence. Why had they chosen her? Was it trust or sacrifice? Sometimes the line was too thin to see. They reached the crest, and there it was, a flicker of light in the valley below, too steady for fire, too faint for a camp equipment, transmitting. Her chest tightened. The commander's voice echoed in her memory. No margin. She steadied the scope against her shoulder, the cool glass meeting her eye. The world sharpened into lines and shadows. There was movement around the device, figures, 3, maybe 4, faces blurred by distance. But one stood closer, half-turned, features caught in the faint glow. Her heart stuttered. She knew that face. The breath in her throat froze, then broke jagged. The others waited for her signal, eyes on her, trusting her aim, her call. But inside, the silence roared. Because that face belonged to someone who should not have been there. Someone who had been part of her past, buried deep. Someone who had once saved her life when the world had tried to take it. Her finger hovered on the trigger. She whispered to herself, too low for comms to catch, "Why are you here?" The knight did not answer. And for the first time since she put on the uniform, doubt burned hotter than resolve. Why did it have to be him? Through the scope, the valley seemed to breathe, shadows shifting like restless spirits. The figures moved cautiously around the transmitter, their shapes bending in and out of the dim glow. But one remained steady, profile sharp, unmistakable even at this distance. She blinked, hoping the image might dissolve into mistake, but it didn't. It was him. Her chest constricted against the cold mountain air. Memories, once buried under discipline and routine, tore loose like shrapnel in the bloodstream. She could still hear his voice from years ago, not in combat, but in the ruins of a childhood home, telling her to stand, to run, to live. A promise exchanged in whispers when the world had already decided she wasn't meant to survive. And now he was here. Her finger hovered just above the trigger, rigid, refusing. Orders pressed against her spine, heavy, unforgiving, no margin. The mission was clear. Intercept the signal, neutralize threats, return. But what do you do when the threat is the reason you're still breathing at all? Do you have eyes? Malik's whisper crackled through the comms. She exhaled slowly, buying time. Affirmative. Target count. Her throat dried. 4, equipment confirmed. Call it. All eyes turned to her again. Even in the darkness she could feel it. Trust, expectation, dependence. The weight of leadership wasn't in rank. It was in being the one everyone else followed when silence was louder than fear. She steadied her stance, forcing the tremor from her voice. Hold position. A pause, questions hung unspoken in the stillness, but they obeyed. The scope pressed against her brow again. She tracked him, his hands moving over the device, his lips speaking words she couldn't hear but knew. He was no prisoner, no wanderer caught in the wrong place. He was part of them. But why? She lowered the rifle slightly, shifting to study the others. Their weapons were crude, their movements untrained compared to his. He didn't belong, not truly. yet he stood among them as if he had nowhere else left to go. Her breath clouded the glass, blurring the image. She pulled away, blinking against the sting in her eyes. The mountains had no mercy for hesitation. She remembered once asking him, years ago, when their world was fire and ash, if he thought survival made them stronger or weaker. He hadn't answered then, just placed a hand on her shoulder and told her to keep walking. Now, looking at him framed in her sights, she wondered if silence had been his answer all along. Malik's voice again, softer this time. "What are we waiting for?" She didn't answer, not yet. Her mind raced, weaving between duty and memory. She couldn't tell the others, couldn't risk their judgment, their mistrust. If they knew her hesitation wasn't tactical but personal, they'd question everything. And in war, trust lost was trust you never got back. So she carried it alone. "Two will move left," she whispered finally, her tone clipped, professional. "One right, stay low, I'll cover." It was a decision, not the one the commander expected, but one that bought her minutes. Minutes to think, minutes to understand. Boots shifted against rock as her team dispersed. The air grew heavier, anticipation thick. She inched forward, lowering herself flat against the ridge. The stone was cold beneath her chest, biting through her uniform. Every scrape of her elbow sounded louder than it should. She adjusted the scope again, following him. He turned slightly, his face catching full in the glow. And in that single, unguarded moment, he looked up. Her pulse spiked. Did he see her? Impossible at this distance, at this angle. Yet the way his gaze lingered on the ridgeline felt deliberate. A pause, a knowing. Her lips parted, breath shallow. She pulled back from the scope, pressing her cheek to the dirt, hidden in shadow. Silence roared in her ears. Then, faint but undeniable, a voice carried on the wind. His voice. Not shouting, not warning, just speaking as if to no one. Words too broken by distance to make sense. Yet the cadence was familiar, a rhythm she once knew by heart. She wanted to believe it was coincidence, but deep inside a truth clawed up. He knew she was here. And worse, he wanted her to know he knew. The device pulsed with a faint hum, its light steady, unrelenting. Whatever it transmitted, it was constant. Data, coordinates, a warning, she couldn't tell. But command had been clear, shut it down, no matter the cost. Her hand drifted to the photo in her pocket again. The paper edges bit against her skin. She thought of the faces on it, the reason she kept moving, the reason she put on this uniform even when every step forward felt like walking into fire. She forced herself to breathe, to center. Duty was not a word. Duty was a choice made over and over, even when it broke you. "On my mark," she whispered into comms, "prepare to engage." But her heart betrayed her. The others tensed, ready, their shadows barely visible in the rock. She knew they would fire the moment she gave the word, and if they did, he would fall with the rest. Her breath caught, ragged. She thought of the last time she saw him, younger, bloodied but alive, his hand gripping hers as the world around them crumbled. He had pushed her forward, taken the risk that saved her. His last words to her then, "Live, even if I don't." And here he was, alive, but on the other side. Her stance held, steel against breaking, but inside a storm. "Mark!" Gunfire shattered the night. But not hers. She held fire even as the valley erupted. Stones splintered, dust rose, shouts filled the air. Figures scattered, chaos ripping their formation apart. The transmitter wavered in the glow, sparks flying. She tracked him through the scope, every instinct screaming to finish it. His eyes swept the ridgeline again, and for the briefest second they locked. Across distance, across silence, across the years that had buried them both, his gaze met hers. Not fear, not anger, something deeper. Recognition. Then he vanished into shadow, gone before the dust settled. Her team pressed forward, finishing the assault. The valley fell still again, smoke curling into the air, acrid and heavy. The transmitter lay in pieces, sparks dying. Malik's voice broke through, panting, urgent. "We got it all down." But she knew he was. Her rifle lowered, hands trembling despite her rigid stance. She forced herself up, brushing dust from her uniform, masking the turmoil clawing inside her. "Confirm signal destroyed," she said, her voice even unbroken. Malik hesitated. "Yeah, it's gone." The others regrouped, shadows merging back into one. Relief murmured through their breaths, their movements. For them, the mission was done. For her, it had just begun. Because now she carried a truth no one else could. He was alive, he was on the other side, and he had seen her. The photograph burned in her pocket like a secret she could never share. As they trekked back toward the ridge, silence thick between footsteps, Malik walked beside her again. He didn't look at her directly, just spoke low. "You hesitated," he said. Her chest tightened. "I followed the plan." "No," he whispered. "I've seen you shoot faster than anyone. Tonight you waited. Why?" She didn't answer, couldn't. The truth would unravel everything. Instead, she let the silence linger. Her breath ragged, but her stance unbroken. Because she knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. How do you bury a secret that refuses to stay quiet? The descent from the ridge should have felt like victory. The mission was logged, the transmitter destroyed, their boots carrying the weight of success. But every step down into the valley carried something else for her. A heaviness. A silence that pressed harder than the night. Her team moved in practiced formation, shadows blending with the stone, but she could feel Malik's presence close, hovering, his earlier words still sharp. "You hesitated." She told herself he couldn't know, that his suspicion was nothing more than nerves, the kind that chewed at men who wanted everything clean, simple, justified. War wasn't clean. It wasn't supposed to be. But doubt was a poison, and she could feel it already seeping into the spaces between them. Her boots struck hard dirt, dust rose. The air smelled faintly of cordite, the metallic tang of gunfire lingering in the valley like a ghost. She scanned the horizon, habit, instinct, but also something deeper, a desperate search for him. But there was nothing. Just silence, broken only by the crunch of movement. The extraction point was still miles off. Hours of terrain waited between them and safety. She pulled her hood tighter, forcing her body into rhythm. March, breathe, scan, march. Yet her mind refused to obey. It kept returning to his face, to the way his eyes had locked with hers in the chaos. Recognition. That was no hallucination. And if he was alive, if he had chosen this side, what did it mean? The photograph in her pocket pressed harder against her ribs. She didn't take it out. Not yet. Not with eyes near. Malik finally spoke, his tone low, almost conversational. "Funny, isn't it? How sometimes the ones we expect to resist fold first, and the ones we doubt," he trailed off, letting the words hang, waiting for her to catch them. She didn't. He sighed, adjusting his pack. "Never mind." But his silence after was heavier than the words had been. The commander's voice flickered through comms, distant, distorted. "Report." She keyed her mic, forcing steadiness. "Target destroyed, 4 hostiles neutralized, no casualties." A pause, then, "Copy, proceed to extraction." Simple, cold. Just another mission checked off a list too long to ever finish. But inside her, nothing was simple. They reached a dry riverbed, the rocks loose underfoot. The moon slipped behind clouds, casting everything in a deeper dark. She motioned the team to halt, raising a fist. They dropped low without question, trusting her eyes. She scanned the ridges, the tree line, the shifting shadows. Nothing moved, nothing breathed, but the silence itself felt wrong, too perfect. Her pulse quickened. Then a sound, a crack faint but sharp like stone against stone. Her rifle was up instantly, scope cutting through dark. The others froze, following her lead. The air stretched tight, every second too long. Another sound, this time deliberate, closer. Her chest tightened. She knew that rhythm. not of an enemy scouting blind, not of an animal foraging through night. It was measured, controlled, a signal. Her eyes darted across the ridges, searching. And then there, a glint just for a breath, the faintest reflection off glass, binoculars. Someone was watching them. Her teeth clenched. She whispered into comms, eyes on us, northwest ridge. Malik shifted, his weapon rising. Orders. Her finger pressed against the trigger guard. The smart choice, the clean choice was simple. Fire, silence the watcher, keep moving. That was what command expected, what her team expected. But her gut twisted, because she already knew who it was. Him. He hadn't left, he was tracking them. But why to ambush, to warn, to remind her? Her lips parted, words nearly slipping. She wanted to tell them, to explain. But the second she did, everything she carried, her doubt, her past, would unravel. Instead, she steadied her breath. Ignore, keep moving, don't break formation. A pause, Malik's voice sharp. Ignore. Repeat, stay low, move. They obeyed, but the doubt in Malik's tone cut deep. Her own eyes lingered on the ridge until it slipped from view. She couldn't prove it was him, couldn't prove it was, and so the silence grew heavier still. Hours blurred. The terrain grew harsher, their bodies slower. Fatigue clung to every step. When they finally reached the extraction zone, a clearing of broken earth under the thin dawn, relief should have come. Instead, her stomach coiled tighter. The transport arrived in dust and thunder, rotors screaming against the morning. They boarded quick, weight heavy in every movement. She sat near the open panel, wind tearing at her face, eyes fixed on the horizon. She couldn't shake the image, the reflection of glass on the ridge, the eyes she knew had followed her. He was alive, watching, waiting. Back at base, the debrief was swift, clinical. Words like successful, neutralized, secured filled the room, but none of them touched the truth. She kept her voice steady, her report sharp. The commander nodded, satisfied. To them, it was done. But for her, it was only deeper now. Later, in the silence of the barracks, she finally pulled the photo from her pocket. The edges curled, the ink fatting. 4 faces stared back. Hers, her father's, her brother's, and his. Her finger traced the corner where his face smiled faintly, frozen in time. Once they had been bound not by blood, but by survival. Once they had promised each other that whatever came, they would not become like those who had broken them. And now, her chest burned. She pressed the photo back into her pocket, burying it before the others could see. A knock at the door. Her shoulders stiffened. Yeah. Malik stepped in, closing it behind him. His eyes didn't carry nerves now. They carried certainty. You knew one of them, he said. The words cut sharp, not as accusation but as fact. Her breath hitched. You don't know what you're saying. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You froze, you held fire, and tonight when you told us to ignore that ridge, you knew. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She wanted to deny it, to push him back with the authority of rank, with the cold shield of command. But his eyes were steady, unflinching. You knew, he repeated. Her lips trembled, then silence. Because lies would collapse and truth would destroy. He exhaled, his voice softening. Who is he? Her throat ached. She turned away, staring at the window, at the empty stretch of sky beyond. Words clawed against her chest, desperate to escape, but she held them. Because once spoken, there was no taking them back. Finally, barely above a whisper, someone who saved me, once. Malik said nothing for a long time, then and now. Her eyes closed, her breath shuddered. I don't know. The silence stretched. Malik's presence lingered, heavy, unreadable. Then he stepped back, hand on the door. Command doesn't need to know, not yet, but if it compromises us again. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. The door clicked shut. She sank onto the bunk, hands trembling, the photo burning in her pocket like fire. Sleep didn't come, only questions, only the weight of knowing he was still out there, watching, waiting, and the certainty that their paths would cross again. The war was no longer just theirs. It was hers. Why did Command call her in so soon? The mission had ended less than a day ago. Dust still clung to her boots. Her muscles still carried the weight of mountains and silence. And yet the summons came clipped, urgent, no room for refusal. She sat now in the steel-gray room, the walls bare except for a single clock that ticked too loud. The commander leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his eyes fixed on her with the kind of gaze that didn't blink often. "You did well," he said flatly. The words should have felt like recognition. Instead, they felt like a setup. Her breath caught, ragged but controlled. "We completed the objective." "Yes," his tone sharpened, "but something isn't finished." He slid a folder across the table. She hesitated before pulling it closer. Inside, grainy satellite images, blurred but undeniable. A figure moving through the ridges, alone, steady. Her chest tightened. The commander's voice cut through. "Survivor from the site. We don't know who he is yet, but he knows we're operating in that corridor. That makes him a problem." Her hands pressed the folder closed. "You want me to go back?" "I want you to erase what remains," he said, "before it grows into something bigger." The room fell silent. She forced herself to breathe evenly to mask the storm inside. Erase. The word wasn't tactical. It was final, and it was aimed squarely at the man whose face she still saw when she closed her eyes. She swallowed hard. "When?" "Tonight." Her pulse spiked. "The team isn't ready, they need rest." "You'll adapt." His tone allowed no argument. "We don't leave loose ends." The conversation ended there. Orders weren't conversations. They were verdicts. She rose, saluted, left the room with her spine rigid. But as soon as the door shut behind her, her breath broke jagged. Back in the barracks, the team stirred as she entered. Malik's eyes found hers first, steady, watchful. "Another?" he asked, though he already knew. She gave a curt nod. "Same valley tonight." A ripple of unease moved through the room. They'd barely shed the last mission's dust, but soldiers didn't argue with orders. They obeyed. As the others prepared in silence, Malik approached her, his voice low, sharp. "This is about him, isn't it?" Her jaw tightened. "It's about orders." He didn't flinch. "You don't believe that." She didn't answer. Couldn't. Instead, she turned away, focusing on her rifle, her gear, the rituals of preparation. Metal and leather were easier to face than truth. Malik lingered. "If he's still alive, you need to decide what side he's on, before someone decides for you." His words cut deeper than he knew. Because that decision, it wasn't just tactical, it was personal, and personal was dangerous. Hours later, the transport lifted them into the night again. The same mountains loomed below, silent and ancient, watching with indifference. She sat rigid, her hands clenched, the folder's images burned into her memory. The valley stretched wide under the moon. Shadows pooled deep in the rocks. The air felt heavier than before, charged with something unseen. They landed, rough boots striking dirt in unison. She raised a fist, motioning the team forward, her movements precise. But inside, her chest ached with every step. The silence here wasn't like before. It wasn't waiting. It was watching. Halfway up the ridge, Malik whispered through comms, "Movement, north slope." She froze, brought her rifle up, scoped the shadows. And there, a figure, alone, moving with purpose but not haste, as if he knew exactly where he was going. Her breath caught. It was him. He paused at a rock outcropping, scanning the terrain below. His face caught the moonlight just enough to erase all doubt. The team tensed around her, weapons raised, fingers poised. She whispered, "Hold." Malik's voice cut back, "We can take him now." "Hold," she repeated, sharper. Every second stretched thin. Her pulse hammered against the scope. She could end it now, a single shot, clean, simple, Duty would be satisfied, the commander's orders fulfilled, the secret buried. But her finger refused. Because this wasn't just a target. This was the ghost of every reason she'd survived long enough to even wear this uniform. She watched him kneel, place something on the ground. Metal glinted faintly, not a weapon, a box. He opened it, adjusted something inside, not hostile, intentional. Malik whispered, "What the hell is he doing?" She narrowed her eyes through the scope. The device hummed faintly, a soft light pulsing like a heartbeat, not like the transmitter from before. Different, smaller, portable. Her breath hitched. This wasn't an enemy operation. This was him, alone, deliberate. And if command didn't know? Her throat tightened. "Orders," Malik pressed. "Say the word." She stayed silent. Then, as if sensing the scope on him, he lifted his head. And again, across distance and silence, their eyes met. No surprise, no fear, just recognition. And then he raised a hand. Not with a weapon, open, palm forward, a gesture as old as trust. Her breath broke. Malik cursed under his breath. "What is this?" The team shifted uneasily, their confusion mounting. This wasn't combat, this wasn't clean. Her lips trembled. Hold position. Every nerve in her body screamed at the choice. She had just disobeyed in the most dangerous way possible, not against orders alone, but against the trust of those who followed her. The man lowered his hand, picked up the device and turned, vanishing into the ridgeline shadows. The team exhaled as if released from a held breath. Malik's voice cut sharp, angry. "You let him go." Her jaw clenched. "Mission continues, he's not the objective." That was the objective. "Not until I confirm it," she snapped. The silence after burned. They moved deeper into the valley, the air thick with unspoken tension. Every step carried the weight of betrayal she couldn't explain. Hours later, as dawn bled into the horizon, they reached a ridge overlooking another clearing. There, faint signals pulsed on their detectors. But no hostiles, no equipment, just a single marker stone freshly placed. At its base, a folded scrap of cloth. She descended slowly, heart pounding. The cloth was familiar, worn, faded. She knelt, fingers brushing it open. It was a fragment of uniform, not theirs, his. Inside, scrawled in hurried hand, a single line of writing. Her breath caught. It was his handwriting, and it said, "Not enemy, don't trust them." Her vision blurred. She closed the cloth quickly, tucking it into her vest before anyone else could see. Behind her, Malik's voice carried suspicion sharp enough to cut. "What is it?" "Nothing," she said flatly. But inside, everything had changed. He wasn't running from them, he was warning her. And now she had to choose who to believe, command, her team, or the one man who had once saved her life and might now be the only truth left in a war built on lies. Her breath grew ragged, her stance held unbroken. But steel forged from blood and will could bend, and she could feel the bend already starting. The silence in the transport on the return flight was heavier than the roar of the engines. She sat rigid, staring at nothing, replaying every moment of the valley, his face, his hand raised in surrender or maybe in trust, the message scrawled on faded cloth, and above it all the commander's order echoing in her head, "Erase what remains." Her team sat scattered around her, silent but restless. Malik's eyes burned holes into her profile. He didn't need to speak. His anger, his doubt, were sharp enough to cut through the drone of the aircraft. The hatch finally opened, desert air rushing in. They disembarked into the base like shadows returning from a place no light touched. She gave the formal report. "No contact, area clear." The commander's gaze narrowed, searching her face. "You're certain?" Her spine stayed straight, her voice unwavering. "Yes, sir." The lie slid from her tongue smoother than she expected, but it left a taste of iron, bitter, like blood. The commander dismissed them with a nod, his expression unreadable. But as she turned, she caught it, the flicker of suspicion. Brief, sharp, enough to coil in her chest like wire tightening around her lungs. She walked the corridor back to her quarters, each step heavier than the last. She thought she was alone, until a hand caught her arm, firm but not hostile. Malik. The hallway lights cast shadows over his face, but his eyes were bright, unblinking. Why did you lie? Her throat tightened. Not here. He followed her inside, shutting the door behind them. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, before he finally spoke again. You saw him, you had him in your scope. His voice cracked with restrained fury. Why didn't you take the shot? She forced her breath even, steady. Because he wasn't the threat. Malik stepped closer, his fists clenched. That's not your call to make. Orders were clear. You don't get to rewrite them. Her eyes burned, but she held his gaze. Sometimes orders are wrong. The words fell between them, like a grenade with the pin pulled. Malik's jaw flexed. Do you even hear yourself? You're gambling with our lives, with the team's safety, because of some man out there. Who is he to you? Her chest clenched. She could have lied, could have deflected, but the truth pressed too heavy inside. He saved me once, before this war twisted everything. When I had nothing left, he was the reason I stood back up. Her voice broke, then steadied with iron. That matters, and I know he's not the enemy. Malik's expression hardened, disbelief cutting across his features. You're compromised. She flinched, the word like a blade. He turned toward the door. If command finds out. She grabbed his wrist, her grip desperate. Don't, not yet. He stopped, staring down at her hand on his arm. She forced the words out, her voice trembling but fierce. If you ever trusted me in the field, trust me now, just for a little longer. For a moment the storm in his eyes raged unchecked. Then slowly he pulled free, shaking his head. One chance, that's all you get. After that, I won't protect you. The door shut behind him and she collapsed onto the cot, her breath ragged, her body trembling. She pulled the cloth fragment from her vest, smoothing it open again. The handwriting blurred as her eyes stung. Not enemy, don't trust them. Every syllable pressed into her like a brand. The next days blurred into restless routine. Training drills, equipment checks, mission briefings, all hollow, all mechanical. She carried herself like steel, unbroken, but inside she was fraying. The commander called her in again. He studied her with a predator's calm. No trace in the valley, you're certain? Yes, sir, her voice didn't waver. But his silence stretched, long and heavy. Finally, he leaned forward. Loose ends have a way of unraveling everything. I expect your loyalty, absolute. Her chest burned, but she kept her expression neutral. You have it, sir. The lie weighed heavier this time. Back in the barracks, Malik avoided her gaze. The team followed his lead, their silence a wall she couldn't breach. Isolation settled over her like a second skin. That night, unable to sleep, she slipped outside. The desert air was cool, the stars endless. She let herself breathe, ragged and unsteady, until a voice broke the quiet. You're not the only one who saw him. She spun, hand instinctively on her weapon. But it wasn't Malik. It was Ray's, the youngest in the team, eyes wide but voice steady. What did you see? She asked carefully. Ray's hesitated, then stepped closer. I saw him put that device down. Didn't look like a weapon, more like a transmitter, or maybe a signal. But when you told us to hold fire, I knew you saw something I didn't. Her pulse quickened, and you didn't say anything. Ray's shrugged faintly. Didn't seem like my place. Malik, he won't forgive you for it, but me, I think sometimes orders don't tell the whole story. She exhaled, relief and dread colliding inside her. Keep this between us. Ray's nodded, his expression unreadable in the starlight. For now. The words lingered like a promise or a warning. Days later, another mission came down. Not the valley this time. A recon sweep further north where satellite pics showed unusual movement. The team prepared, but tension crackled in every glance, every silence. Malik's mistrust had poisoned the air. They deployed at dawn, shadows stretching long over the barren landscape. The mission unfolded in silence, methodical, nothing unusual at first. But as the sun dipped, movement stirred on the horizon. Figures, 3 of them, approaching slowly. Weapons raised, the team froze in formation. Through her scope she saw them clearly. Not soldiers, civilians, tired, unarmed, carrying little but the dust on their clothes. Her voice cut through comms, "Hold fire." But Malik's came sharp, immediate. "Orders say no contacts pass. They're potential couriers." "They're unarmed," she snapped. "We don't take chances." The team wavered, torn between 2 leaders. Her breath broke, ragged but steadying into steel. "Stand down, that's an order." The silence stretched, unbearable. Then slowly, one by one, rifles lowered. Except Malik's. He stayed locked on target, jaw tight, eyes hard. Her voice trembled with controlled fury. "Malik, don't." For a long moment it seemed he wouldn't listen. Then, finally, he lowered his weapon, his glare cutting into her like a blade. The civilians passed, their eyes wide with fear but their steps quick, eager to vanish beyond the ridge. When they were gone, Malik's voice cracked the comms, venomous. "You've forgotten what we are." She didn't answer, couldn't, because deep down she knew what she was becoming, someone command would not forgive. That night, as they set camp in the shadow of stone cliffs, she unrolled her pack and found it. Another cloth scrap, folded, hidden inside. Her chest seized as she unfolded it, fingers trembling. This time, the message was longer. "They're using you. The truth is buried in the northern ridge. Trust no one inside your walls." Her breath broke sharp, chest tight with fear and fury. Because if he was right, then every mission, every order, every drop of blood spilled had been built on a lie. And soon she would have to choose, obey the chain of command or tear it down with her own hands. Her stance remained unbroken, but inside, the steel was bending toward something darker, heavier, something that might one day snap. Why was the northern ridge marked so heavily on their maps, yet never mentioned in their briefings? The thought gnawed at her as they moved under moonlight, boots whispering against sand and gravel. The desert around them felt hollow, stripped bare, as if it had been waiting centuries for someone to peel back its secrets. The coordinates matched the message. The ridge rose in jagged teeth against the horizon, black against the stars. Her breath was steady, her stance unbroken, but inside her pulse raced. The team advanced in silence. Malik kept close to the point, his body taut with suspicion, his eyes never leaving her back. Reyes lingered near the rear, his steps cautious, his gaze shifting as though he too carried the weight of secrets. They reached the first outcropping just before dawn. A soft wind whistled through the stones, carrying with it a sound, faint, metallic, not nature. She raised a fist, the team froze, they crouched in shadow, eyes scanning the terrain. There it was again, a hum almost too low to register, buried beneath the desert's stillness. She gestured to fan out. They moved like shadows, deliberate and quiet, every movement measured. At the base of the ridge they found it, half buried beneath rock and sand, a hatch, rusted, scarred by time and fire. Her fingers traced the edges, not local, not ancient, military. The hum came from within. Her breath hitched, but she masked it with command steel. "We breach, quiet." Malik's voice cut sharp. "This isn't our directive." She met his glare, unflinching. "Our directive is incomplete." For a moment their stares clashed, a silent war. Then Malik gave a curt nod, his jaw grinding, and stepped back. They worked the hatch open, metal groaning in protest. Dust billowed. The scent of rust and old oil filled the air. One by one they descended. The chamber below was narrow, suffocating, carved into the stone. Wires lined the walls, feeding into consoles half alive with flickering lights. The hum grew louder, pulsing like a heartbeat beneath the earth. She swept her light across the room. Symbols marked the walls, not their language, not familiar, but the equipment, too advanced to be abandoned, too alive to be forgotten. Ray's whispered, awe in his tone, "What the hell is this place?" No one answered. Her gaze locked on a terminal in the corner. A monitor sputtered to life under her touch, spilling fractured lines of code across the screen. Fragmented, corrupted, but one phrase cut through the static. Project Scepter, containment protocol active. Her stomach dropped. She didn't know what it meant, but she knew it wasn't supposed to be here. Behind her, Malik's voice hardened. "We're leaving now." She turned, eyes burning. "Not until we know what this is." He stepped closer, fury rising. "You think you're protecting us. You're dragging us into something buried for a reason. This isn't about truth. It's about survival, and you're choosing the wrong side." Her voice cracked with restrained desperation. "There are no sides if the orders themselves are lies." The silence fractured when the chamber trembled, a low rumble, dust shaking loose from the ceiling. The hum grew louder, a warning pulse. Rays shouted, "We triggered something." The lights flared, blinding white. Then a hiss. A door at the far end slid open, ancient mechanisms grinding. They raised weapons instantly, the team tense, breath shallow. From the shadows beyond the door, figures emerged. Not soldiers, not civilians, survivors. 3 of them, faces gaunt, eyes sunken, clothes tattered from months, maybe years underground. Their hands raised, trembling. "Please," one croaked in broken dialect, "no more." The weight of their presence crashed over her. Survivors, from what? From who? Her chest tightened. She lowered her weapon an inch. "Who are you?" The man staggered closer, pointing weakly at the consoles. His voice cracked like dry earth. "Prisoners, tests, not enemy, yours." Her blood ran cold. Malik snapped his rifle toward the man. "Don't listen." "Stop," she barked. The survivors dropped to their knees, trembling. The youngest, barely more than a boy, clutched at her sleeve, tears streaking through grime. "Help us. They'll erase us if you leave." Her breath grew ragged. Malik's voice thundered behind her. "Orders are to eliminate unknowns, loose ends. You heard the commander yourself." She spun, fury raw. "They're people, Malik, not loose ends." The chamber shuddered again, louder this time. Dust rained down. Somewhere deeper in the ridge, machinery roared awake. Rays shouted, "We need to move." Her mind raced. Survivors, hidden facility, containment protocol. Every thread pointed to one truth: the orders weren't about protecting them. They were about burying this. She turned to Malik, her voice breaking but steady. "If we leave them, we're no better than the ones who put them here." Malik's face twisted, torn between rage and disbelief. "You're already betraying everything we swore to." "No," she whispered, the steel in her stance unshakable. "I'm finally honoring it." The roar deepened. The facility was collapsing. She grabbed the boy's hand, pulling him to his feet. "Move now." Malik didn't follow. The team scrambled up the ladder, survivors stumbling behind them. The hatch groaned as they forced it shut, sealing the chaos below. The ridge quaked one last time, then stilled. Silence stretched over the desert once more. Breathless, coated in dust and sweat, she turned back. Malik stood apart, weapon still in hand, his glare burning with betrayal. "You've crossed the line," he said quietly, his voice sharper than any blade. "When we return, I will tell them everything." The survivors clung to her, trembling, eyes wide with desperate gratitude. Her heart thundered. For a moment she considered pleading, explaining, but Malik's stance told her his decision was final. Her voice steadied, quiet but resolute. "Then I'll tell them too, and the truth will speak louder than orders." But even as she said it, a shadow of doubt clawed at her. Would truth survive within walls built on silence, or would it be smothered before it could breathe? The desert wind swept over them, cold and merciless. The ridge loomed behind, a tomb sealing secrets no one wanted unearthed. They began the trek back. Each step was heavy with the knowledge that the war she had entered was no longer against enemies outside their borders, but against the rot festering within. And soon, the first casualty of that war would be trust. Her breath grew ragged, but her stance remained unbroken. What if the people you swore to protect were the ones you were ordered to destroy? That question followed her back across the desert, step by punishing step. The ridge faded into distance, but its echo clung to her like dust in her lungs. The survivors stumbled behind, half-starved and terrified, clutching their thin belongings like lifelines. The team was silent, but not united. Every glance Malik threw her way was sharper than a blade. Every footfall of his boots sounded like a countdown to betrayal. Reyes kept close to the survivors, offering water, steadying their weak frames. His silence carried something else, a fragile kind of trust. By the time the base came into sight, the sun was climbing high, heat shimmering against the sand. The walls loomed like a fortress or a prison. Her chest tightened. How could she bring them inside when she didn't know who among her own would see them as human or as evidence to be erased? At the gate, soldiers met them. Their eyes lingered on the strangers, suspicion sharp. Malik stepped forward. His voice was steady, controlled. "We found them at the ridge, survivors, possible contamination." The word struck like a hammer, possible contamination. It wasn't concern, it was a weapon. The guards' hands hovered near their rifles. Her own voice cut through, firm, commanding. "They're unarmed, malnourished. They need medical attention, not a cage." One of the guards looked between her and Malik, hesitation etched across his face, orders and humanity pulling in opposite directions. Finally he nodded. "Medbay first, command will decide after." The survivors were escorted, shaky steps carrying them toward sterile corridors that smelled of antiseptic and fear. She wanted to follow, but the summons came swiftly. "The commander wants you, now." She entered the briefing room with dust still clinging to her uniform, sweat drying on her brow. The commander sat at the head of the table, eyes like cold steel. Malik stood at his side. Her stomach dropped. The commander's voice was quiet, dangerous in its calm. "Explain." She held his gaze. "We found survivors in a restricted site. They need care and answers." Malik's voice was sharp, immediate. She withheld intelligence, disobeyed directives, lied about what we saw in the valley. The silence after his words was suffocating. The commander leaned forward. "Is that true?" Her breath caught. Her mind screamed to deny, to protect herself. But the weight of what she carried, the fragments of truth, the cloth messages, the faces of those survivors, anchored her. "Yes," she said finally, her voice steady. "Because orders demanded silence where there should have been truth. Those people were imprisoned, experimented on, erased. If we call that loyalty, then loyalty has lost its meaning." Malik's jaw tightened. "She's compromised. She's no longer fit to lead." The commander studied her with unnerving patience. Then he spoke, each word precise. "You've crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed." Her chest burned, but she forced her voice out, low but unyielding. "Sometimes the only way forward is through the line." The commander didn't respond. He only gestured. Guards entered, rifles at the ready. Her hand twitched toward her sidearm, instinct, not decision. But Ray's eyes caught hers from the hallway beyond, wide with warning. She let the weapon stay, for now. The guards didn't shackle her, but their presence was prison enough. They escorted her to quarters, stationed themselves outside, not free, not condemned, suspended in a purgatory of silence. The hours stretched. She sat on the cot, staring at her hands, dirt still in the creases of her palms. What had she done? Had she saved anyone, or only hastened their destruction? A soft knock at the door, then a whisper. "It's me." Ray slipped inside, moving quickly, quietly. His eyes darted to the guards beyond, then back to her. "They're moving the survivors tonight. Off base. No records. Once they're gone, they're gone." Her chest constricted. "Where?" He shook his head. "They don't say, they don't need to, we both know." She rose, her breath sharp, her stance steady. "Then we don't let it happen." Ray's hesitated, fear flickering in his gaze. "That's suicide." Her voice softened, frayed with exhaustion and conviction. "It's survival, not theirs, ours, because if we let this rot stand, then what are we?" He didn't answer, but his silence was not refusal. That night, shadows swallowed the base. Engines rumbled somewhere beyond the walls, a transport being readied. She moved like a ghost, slipping past familiar corridors, every corner laced with memory and betrayal. Ray's trailed her, his breath tight, his hands trembling against his rifle. At the med bay, the air stank of antiseptic and fear. The survivors huddled together, eyes wide, resignation already written on their faces. She crouched before them, her voice barely more than a breath. "We're leaving, now." Their disbelief was raw, but their hope sparked, fragile, desperate. They moved quickly, silently. Every shadow a threat, every sound a warning. But Malik was waiting. He stepped from the corridor, rifle raised, eyes dark with resolve. "You can't save them," he said quietly. "You'll only damn yourself." Her breath caught. She raised her weapon, steady despite the tremor in her chest. "Get out of the way." His gaze flicked to the survivors, then back to her. "I trusted you once. Don't make me your enemy." Her voice cracked with grief. "I don't want you as my enemy." For a long, unbearable moment, neither moved. The corridor was suffocating with silence, broken only by the soft whimper of the boy clutching her sleeve. Ray shifted, his rifle wavering. "Please, Malik, don't." Malik's jaw tightened, his weapon stayed raised. And in that moment, she understood trust wasn't coming back. The bond they'd built in fire and blood had been severed, clean and final. Her voice lowered, raw. "Then this is where we break." The standoff stretched, then shattered with the blare of alarms. Guards' footsteps thundered closer, shouts echoing through the halls. She didn't wait. She fired a single shot, not at Malik but at the lights above. Glass shattered, sparks rained, darkness swallowed the corridor. "Move," she shouted. The survivors surged forward, Rays at their side. She covered their retreat, her heart a storm of fury and grief. Through the chaos, she caught one last glimpse of Malik's face, illuminated in the flicker of sparks, torn between anger and something deeper. Regret, or only resolve, she couldn't tell. Then the darkness took him, and she ran. They slipped through service corridors, past blind corners, through the breach in the perimeter fence she'd memorized months ago but never thought she'd use. The desert air hit her lungs like fire. Freedom, fragile, temporary, was theirs. Behind them, the alarms roared louder. Ahead of them, only silence. She didn't know if they were running toward safety or straight into another trap. But she knew one truth. Her breath was ragged, her body broken, but her stance, her will was unbroken. And tomorrow, it would have to be stronger still. She should have collapsed. Her legs trembled, her breath came in broken bursts, and yet she stayed standing. Why? Why not let go and rest at last? The answer was buried beneath scars only she carried. The night had gone silent after the final exchange. No gunfire, no radio static, just the whisper of wind over shattered stone. She leaned against a broken wall, rifle cradled not as a weapon now, but as a memory. The metal was warm against her skin. It had been her lifeline. It had also been her burden. Somewhere in the ruins behind her, men and women whispered her name, not as a soldier, not as a rank, but as someone who had held the line when it mattered. She didn't step forward to claim it. She didn't need to. Quiet dignity was enough. Her eyes traced the horizon. Dawn was smearing pale light across the mountains, washing shadows into gold. The same mountains she had crossed weeks ago in fear. The same silence she had once dreaded now felt like absolution. A voice came faint, cracked but steady from her earpiece. Extraction inbound, 2 minutes. She closed her eyes. For so long she had counted in seconds, in heartbeats, in breaths she wasn't sure she would take again. Now 2 minutes felt infinite. Her body wanted to sink, to lie down among the rubble. But a memory returned, her brother's laughter echoing through a childhood kitchen, her mother's voice calling her name across the yard, a promise whispered to herself in the dark, "If I make it back, I'll stand until they see me." So she stood, broken but unbent. When the helicopter's roar reached her ears, the dust kicking up around her, she didn't wave. She didn't shout. She simply waited, steel forged from blood and had no need for spectacle. Hands reached for her as the bird touched down. She let them guide her in, her weight heavy but her spirit unyielding. The others looked at her, some with awe, some with sorrow, all with recognition. They had fought too, but they knew. What she carried inside, few would ever understand. She leaned back against the cabin wall as the helicopter lifted. The battlefield shrank beneath them, a patchwork of scars and silence. Her fingers grazed the rifle across her lap. It wasn't triumph she felt, not pride, just release. In the hum of the rotors, she heard her own heartbeat for the first time in days. Slow, steady, human. She opened her eyes to the sunrise breaking fully over the peaks. It was beautiful in a way only survivors know. A reminder that life itself, fragile and fleeting, was still hers to hold. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.